Hello. I've just noticed there's a wasp up there. So if you see me scream and run away, it's nothing to do with the book or you. Just there's a wasp. Hello everyone, hope you're alright. Welcome to another instalment of Lockdown in Lockdown. We are on death sentence. We are sliding into the kind of final third of the book now. Alex is a black suit, or at least he was. The warden converted him into a black suit, but he kind of remembered who he was. He helped Z and Simon, and they all helped each other get out of the tunnels beneath Furnace. They used an elevator to get up into a control room. The elevator is the only link between the monstrous roots of Furnace Penitentiary and the kind of canopy of general population. So they've blocked off the elevator. There's no black suits can get into the prison. They're up in the prison now. They've just entered general population. They've killed the black suits that are up there, or rather the prisoners who are out of their cells killed the black suits. And now Alex and Simon are in general population. Z had to stay behind because the only way they could open the door was from inside the control room. So he is currently trapped in the control room while the black suits try and climb the elevator shaft. So he is on borrowed time, because if they get to Z before he can find a way to open the door, then, well, he's history. So now Alex and Simon have just arrived in general population. They've kind of made almost a pact with the skulls. We'll get you out of here if you let us live. Not in so many words, but that's basically the way it always is with the skulls. And Bodhi is... I can't remember if I told you his name yet. But anyway, yeah, Bodhi. You're about to find that out. So Bodhi is now the leader of the Skulls after Kevin's death and Gary's... Well, Gary went, didn't he? Went in the river, and Gary is now a monster right down in Furnace. I'm sure you remember all this anyway, because we've literally just been reading this book. Okay. Battle plans. We sat at a table in the slop room, every square centimetre of space around us packed tight with inmates. The skulls occupied the benches closest to Simon and me, the kid with the scar, his name was Bodhi, resting the shotgun barrel on his legs as he digested what we just told him. "You're telling me that the black suits are us?" he asked eventually. I nodded, wondering if I was going to have to go through the whole thing for a third time. I'd already told them everything about the warden's procedure, everything about the nectar, and everything about Furnace's plans to turn us into monsters, black suits. Well, almost everything. I hadn't mentioned the part about the warden being alive almost a century ago, about their experiments during the Second World War. I figured nobody would believe that if they hadn't seen the evidence with their own silver eyes. "Every one of them," I replied. "Me and Simon included." "Yeah, I know you," said another of the skulls. "You used to bunk with Donovan. You're the one who made it out through the river. You're supposed to be dead." I pointed to myself to prove him wrong. "That's what the warden told you. Didn't want anyone else trying to break out. We made it, most of us anyway, but only as far as Solitary. That river didn't lead anywhere but right into the arms of the Wheezers. You can see what happened after that." "Yeah, they tried to turn you into one of them," said a voice from the back of the room. "But they couldn't." "Because you remembered your name," added Bodhi, with more than a trace of disbelief. "Look, you've seen the evidence. You've seen the Bloodwatch come, the Wheezers. Those creatures they bring back. They're us, halfway through the procedure. That's what the nectar does to them." "Figured that," said another skull. "Remember what happened to Kevin?" Bodhi chewed on his lip, then nodded. Everyone remembered what had happened to Kevin, slaughtered in his cell by the beast that had been brought up from below, the beast that had once been Monty. "We don't have much time," said Simon. "We can sit here and talk about this all day, but unless we make a move soon, the warden's going to find a way up." I thought of Z, still trapped inside the control room. I hoped he was close to bypassing the doors, and that the black suits were still trapped in their hole. The first thing Bodhi had done after the crowd had calmed down was station 2 of his boys on lockout by the vault door, which had swung shut after we'd entered Gen Pop, and 2 more by the elevator to prevent any surprises from the surface. Not that I was expecting any. "And you're sure that they won't send the police?" asked Bodhi. "SWAT or the army crawling up in here? I mean, this is a pretty big deal, us taking over the prison. 6 o'clock news and all that." "They won't," I said. "The warden wouldn't dare let anyone else down here. He wouldn't risk them finding out about the experiments, about what they've been doing to us." "No, he's screwed himself with his own sick plans. I bet you the world doesn't know anything about this." "The world will find out soon enough when we break out of here," said Bodhi, causing a riotous cheer from the rest of the room. "Ain't gonna know what hit it." "It doesn't mean we're safe, though," I went on. I'd been trying not to think about the phone, about Furness's message, but it had been engraved on my memory. "I am coming for you." "My guess," said Simon, "is that Furness will send his own reinforcements from outside." "More black suits," said Bodhi. "Makes sense. But the only way in is using the elevator," I added, a spark of hope igniting in my head, with enough brightness to make me think a crack had opened up in the ceiling. I remembered the blueprint, pulling it out of my pocket and smoothing it down across the table. The gangs leaned in to get a better look, some whistling at the sheer size of the prison laid out in blue and white before them. I ran a finger up the long line of the main elevator shaft, the only connection to the outside world. "So if Furness wants to get in, then you've got to pull the elevator up first," said Bodhi. "And if we're already in there when it reaches the top, then he's going to have a nice little surprise when the doors open." "True that," said Simon, imitating Bodhi. "You know if the cabin is up or down?" "We never know," said one of the 59ers. I recognised him from the gym, where I'd almost been beaten to a pulp. Felt like decades ago. "Sometimes goes back up, sometimes stays down. Only way to know for sure is to open it." "But those doors are reinforced steel," added Bodhi. "Ain't no one ever been able to break through them." "That's because nobody's had the time to do it before," I said with a grin. "You so much as looked at them and the black suits would haul your ass off to the hole, but there isn't anyone to tell you what to do now." I stood up, causing the skulls to jump to their feet, fists and guns raised in unison. I held up my hands in surrender, sighing with frustration. "I might look like one of them," I said, trying to make eye contact with everyone in the room. "But I'm not. My name is Alex Sawyer. I'm a prisoner, just like you. And if you want me to find a way out of here, then you better get those guns out of my face." My calm tone had become a shout by the last 7 words, the anger swelling up inside me. I lashed out, smacking the barrel of Bodhi's shotgun and sending it spinning to the floor. "Easy, Chief," he said, motioning for his lieutenants to back off. "I hear you. One of us. Ain't no thing." I pushed past him, heading back out to the yard. Furness had looked like hell before, but now it was an inferno. Some of the inmates had stripped the sheets from the beds, building a huge pile in the middle of the prison floor that had somehow been set alight. It gave life to the walls, the red stone reflecting the flickering light and creating the illusion that we were all standing inside a living pyre. Although most of the smoke drifted upwards, joining forces with the shadows of the highest levels, black tendrils snaked around the room, making the cloying heat even more unbearable. "Just our luck if we all end up burning to death," coughed Simon, pulling his tattered overalls across his mouth. "The warden would think Christmas had come early." Most of the inmates were still trashing their cells, the rooms and anything else they could get their hands on. I saw gym equipment being thrown onto the fire, and pickaxes too, their wooden handles causing the greedy flames to lick even higher. Somebody lobbed a bottle of cleaning fluid from the laundry and it vanished in a muffled explosion, a fountain of purple fire jetting upwards before fizzling out. "You think you can stop them from burning everything useful?" I said as Bodhi and his crew walked out behind me. "If you want to try calming them down, then you go ahead," he replied. "But if I was you, I'd let them get it out of their systems, else it'll be you burning up in there." "Thanks," I muttered, trying to see past the exhaustion, past the smoke, past the fear to look for a plan. "We should grab anything that we can use as weapons, pickaxes, shovels, and you must have shanks. If the suits do get in, then we're going to need all the help we can get." Bodhi leaned towards a couple of skulls and gave an order, watching them as they ran towards the chipping rooms. The rest of us headed for the elevator, steering well clear of the fire. There were inmates everywhere, some running wild, some cowering in empty cells as if hoping to be locked back in, others in brutal skirmishes, rivals finally getting a chance to beat on their enemies without risking a lockdown. "Only thing worse than a prison with guards," said Bodhi, "is a prison without them." I did my best to ignore the mayhem, trying to focus. We were under siege, and sooner or later the warden would figure out a way to get back in. When he did, we had to be ready. The thought of it caused a sudden rush of vertigo, the room spinning like a gyroscope. I felt like a tree that had been felled, suddenly toppling to my left. Luckily, Simon was there, wrapping his arms around me before I could hit the floor. "You okay?" asked Bodhi. He's fine, Simon answered for me. It's the nectar in his system. It's running out. Hang in there, Alex. You'll be okay in a minute. I'm fine now, I said, shrugging him off and easing myself up. I just tripped. I didn't need to see his face to know he didn't believe me, but there was no time to feel ill. I wiped a hand across my brow, feeling the heat radiating from my skin. Then I set off again. The two skulls by the elevator doors raised their guns when they saw me, but Bodhi was quick to wave them back down. Top priority is getting this open, I said, looking at the elevator, the massive screen above it black and silent. The gap between the reinforced steel doors was thinner than a hair, the joint sealed tight to protect it from attack. It was going to take something special to get through there, but if we could blow a hole in a rock floor to get to the river beneath, then we could do anything. I smiled, the memory giving me an idea. Send some of your boys to the kitchen, I said, turning to Bodhi. Get them to unscrew the gas canisters from the oven. They're still there, right? Yeah, Bodhi replied, nodding at two more skulls who sprinted back the way we'd come. Under some serious lock and key since you guys escaped, but they're there. You thinking of exploding your way out again? I shook my head. The gas in the gloves had demolished a rock floor, but steel was a different matter. It didn't shatter and it didn't crumble. I doubted those canisters would even make a dent. We should be able to get in with the pickaxes, I said, before looking to my side where the vault door stood closed and silent. But if the warden does poke his ugly mug through there, then we can be sure he gets a warm welcome. Bodhi laughed, clapping a hand down on my shoulder. I like the way you think, big man, he said. And for a second I remembered Gary, the former head of the Skulls. He'd have killed me if I'd given him orders like I'd done to Bodhi, even if I did know a way out. I had no doubt that Bodhi was a nasty piece of work. He was a skull, after all. But at least he wasn't a psychopath. I saw the first two gang members racing back across the yard, each with a couple of pickaxes slung over their shoulders. They skidded to a halt by the elevator doors, passing one of the tools to me and another to Bodhi. You want more? Asked one. Nah, this ought to do it, I replied, gripping the wooden handle and remembering the countless blisters it had brought out on my hands. I'd have a few more by the time we'd gotten these doors open. Stand back. The skulls obeyed, backing off as I swung the pickaxe around in an arc. It struck the elevator doors a good metre or so from where I'd intended, causing a clang that thundered through my eardrums, as well as a jarring impact that almost separated my spine from my skull. I dropped the pickaxe to a round of whoops and cheers from the skulls. Looks like someone needs some chipping practice, laughed Bodhi. You want another shot, or you want to let the professionals do it? I stood out of his way, nodding. My strike hadn't even scratched the surface of the elevator, but it had almost torn me in two. Yeah, it's all yours, I said, grimacing. I've got a bomb to make. Under Siege. Let me just... Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I've got enough space to do this because my laptop is running out of space. And I wouldn't want it to cut out halfway through an exciting chapter. There we go, that should do it. Again, Under Siege. Simon followed me back to the slop room to check on the gas canisters. The bedlam in Furnace was growing more out of hand with each passing second, the kids running out of things to rip from the walls and turning on each other. We kept to the edge of the huge room, willing ourselves to be invisible against the walls and the cell bars. But it was impossible when you were taller and broader than anyone else in the yard, and wearing a pinstriped suit to boot. We ducked in through the crack in the rock, both of us nervously eyeing the lifeless machine guns that jutted from the walls. The canteen was still pretty full, the benches occupied by quiet kids who didn't want any part of the madness outside. They retreated from us as we strode across the room, their skittish movements reminding me of stray cats. Any of you guys want to help? I asked. We need weapons. We'll need slop too if anyone feels like cooking. Nobody responded, even their breath locked behind tight lips until Simon and I had passed through the doors into the kitchen. Nothing had changed. The white walls and steel surfaces like a haven compared to the flesh and smoke tones of the prison. At least it was until I looked at the metal surfaces and realised how similar they were to the operating tables down below. Don't think about it, said Simon, and I could almost see the same thoughts running through his mind. "How are you getting on?" I asked the two skulls who were crouching at the oven. They had pulled a leg from one of the counters and were using it as a crowbar to pry open a chain that had been looped around the base of the unit. "Won't budge," hissed one, the crowbar slipping out. "Need a little extra muscle?" I said, squatting down beside them and taking the table leg. Slotting it into the gap between the chain and the oven, I pulled on it with all my strength. I know I hadn't asked to become a monster, but it was satisfying to watch the steel links stretch like Play-Doh until the weakest one popped open. Now that's how you do it. The skulls looked at the chain, then at each other, then at me. Remind me not to get on your bad side," said one, his head disappearing behind the oven. I heard the creak of something being unscrewed and left him to it, looking up to see that Simon had vanished. I followed the sound of furious chomping and found him gorging on some cold leftovers in a pot of slop. He peered over the top and smiled. "Oh man, I didn't think I was ever going to taste anything this good ever again," he said. The sound of his stomach gurgled across the room, making me realise how hungry I was. I walked over, ready to scrape out a handful for myself, but Simon pulled the giant pot away. "Not a good idea," he said. "You've had way too much nectar. You try eating this and you'll only spew it right up again." "You liar," I said, raising an eyebrow. "You just want it all to yourself. You had nectar and you're fine. Come on, share and share alike." He started to protest, then obviously thought better of it, throwing his hands into the air. "Don't say I didn't warn you," he muttered. I curled my hand around the edge of the pot, my taste buds almost gushing as I scooped the cold mush into my mouth. Simon was right. After so long without food, I thought it tasted like ambrosia, better than anything I'd had in my life, better even than the steak meal Monty had cooked up for us in this very room. I was grinning so hard I could barely keep my mouth closed as I swallowed. I was pulling out my second handful when my body reacted. It felt like somebody had jammed 2 fingers down the back of my throat, my gag reflex so strong that I was barely even aware that I was being sick before I saw the jet of splot explode back into the pot. I retched again, producing nothing but bile, then wiped the tears from my eyes to see Simon staring at the mess I'd just made. "Thanks," he said. "You think I want to eat your bath?" "Jesus," I replied, spitting a ball of acid. I walked to the tap, flushing my mouth out before tentatively swallowing some water. I felt it trickle down my pipe, cooling the fire that the slop had started. Fortunately, the water at least seemed to stay down. "Liquids is fine. The warden probably told you that," Simon said, rooting around the pots for more leftovers. "But the nectar won't let you eat. It gives you everything you need. Until it runs out, that is." "Then what?" I asked. Simon's only answer was a shrug. "Great. So when I got to the surface and the nectar finally ran out, I'd starved to death. Another rosy possible future to look forwards to, thanks to Furnace and the warden." "If you get to the surface," another part of my brain chimed in. And it was right. We were a long way from freedom yet. "If you two freaks have finished throwing your guts up, how about you take this?" said one of the skulls. He lifted one of the gas canisters, a squat metal cylinder with a valve on the top. It was obviously heavy because his whole body was trembling with the weight. I took it from him in one hand, studying the valve. "Know what you're doing with that?" Simon asked. "Nope," I replied. "Only thing I know about gas is that it goes kaboom. Reckon we'll be able to rig it up easily enough though. Bring the others when you get them. I'm heading back out." "No worries," he replied, his voice echoing from the pot his head was lost in. I was at the kitchen doors when the prison erupted with the sound of the siren, the klaxon even louder than before. I gripped the canister tight and legged it, barging my way through the canteen and back out into the yards. Z! It had to be Z! The prisoners were panicking, some running back to their cells like they'd been programmed to do, others heading to ground level armed with improvised weapons. As I ran around the fire, I saw that the skulls who'd been clustered in front of the elevator were now standing by the vault door, shotguns levelled at the metal. I flew the last few metres. "What is it?" I yelled over the siren. "Not sure," Bodhi replied, pumping a shell into the chamber of his own shotgun. "Heard something inside though, banging or some such." "Oh, please let it be him," I prayed, slamming the gas canister to the floor in frustration. What if the banging was the black suits finally getting up from the floor below? What if it was them throwing Z from wall to wall until... "If it's your boy, then we'll let him through. But if it isn't..." Bodhi's whisper suddenly became a shout as the siren stopped. It started again, the sounds faint and flat for a second or so, like it was running out of batteries, before fading into its own echo. What the... This time I heard the banging myself, although it was more of a grinding, like a distant elevator struggling up, or a door opening. "Get ready," said Bodhi. "Anything that comes through that door, it don't never get up again." "But what if it's..." My words were lost as the klaxon booted back up, wavering high and low, and reminding me of films where the cops turn their squad car sirens on and off. There was a deep click inside the vault door, followed by a burst of sparks from the hinges that sent everybody jumping backward. Something else thumped into place inside the mechanism. Then, with the grating squeal of metal on metal, it began to swing open. "Here we go," yelled Bodhi as the siren cut out again. "Be ready! Be ready!" With the alarm now off, it was as though the entire prison was holding its breath to see what came through the door. Even the roar of the fire dulling to a muted growl. A curtain of sparks exploded from the hinges as they swung out, parting to reveal the short corridor beyond and a single tiny figure bolting down it at full tilt. Someone let off a shot, the gun flashing in the corner of my vision, and a section of the tunnel wall blew out in an explosion of rock and smoke. The boy collapsed, rolling awkwardly, and I screamed out to him, "Z! Hold your fire!" yelled Bodhi. "Hold your fire, goddammit!" I was in the tunnel before he'd finished speaking, heading for the bundle of bones and rags on the stone floor. I dropped to my knees beside him at the same time he was pushing himself up. "You crazy?" he shouted, dragging me up with him. "Sorry, they weren't trying to shoot you." "No, are you crazy? Run!" I'd been so focused on Z that I hadn't noticed the movement from the control room, the wave of black and silver that was pouring from the elevator. "Run!" Z yelled again, bolting towards the yard. I didn't need to be told a third time, keeping my head low as the black suits came after us. Then the world dissolved into noise and fire as everyone started shooting, neither side seeming to care that we were smack bang in the middle. The war had begun. Fire in the hole. Momentum was the only thing that got us out of the tunnel alive. I didn't open my eyes to see where I was going. The walls of orange flame and smoke and noise on all sides so thick that they could have been solid. The air shredded by thousands of lethal pellets. 2 lead fists that slammed towards each other. I didn't even breathe. I just ran, throwing myself back the way I'd come and hoping I could reach the door before I was perforated. I skidded out, tripping on a shape in front of me and tumbling to the rock, throwing my hands up to cover my head. I was vaguely aware of a stinging pain in my left leg, but I couldn't bring myself to look. "Get that door closed!" I heard somebody screaming, probably Bodhi. I looked up, the entire prison punctuated by shotgun blasts. It was like watching a film with strobe lights, every juddering movement reduced to a snapshot by a burst of light and sound. One of the skulls flew back as if struck by an invisible hand, his dead eyes questioning this distant ceiling. Somebody else grabbed his gun, struggling to pump a shell into the chamber. "Come on!" yelled another voice, and I saw Z above me offering his hand. I grabbed it, scrambling to my feet and moving out of the doorway. Bodhi and Simon plus a bunch of kids were around the other side of the door, trying to push it closed, and I ran in their direction, growling in pain as something stung my ear. I took a look inside the tunnel as I ran, seeing the black suits marching relentlessly forwards, not slowing or falling despite the wounds visible through their ripped jackets. "They aren't going down!" somebody yelled. "I'm out!" screamed somebody else. "We need more ammo!" "Forget about it," Bodhi replied, the tendons in his neck like wires as he pushed the heavy door. "If we don't get this thing closed, then we're dead." It was too late for another kid, a 59er this time. He rocked back, his chest opened up, the gun clattering to the stone. By the time he followed it, he was gone. The other skulls with guns were backing off, most furiously trying to reload from empty tube magazines, and the rest firing their last rounds into the tunnel. "Are you going to help or what?" yelled Z, who joined the group behind the door, adding his skinny arms to the push. I ignored him, scanning the ground for the dropped canister. It had rolled just outside the tunnel entrance, visible between the legs of the retreating skulls. Throwing my hands up to protect my head, I lurched back across the open door, the gunpowder burning my lungs. "Hold your fire!" I bellowed above the shots, lifting up the canister and grabbing the valve. "What?" yelled the skull closest to me, letting off another round. "You out of your mind?" "Just wait," I said. The kid dropped his gun to his side and dodged out of the doorway, watching me with terror in his eyes as I fiddled with the gas canister. The valve twisted around in a semicircle, closed in one direction and open in the other. Even when it was turned fully on, it only released a whisper of gas. Another kid fell from a wound in his leg. He screamed as he went down, a couple of skulls dragging him out of the line of fire before the black suits could finish him off. Bodhi wasn't having much luck with the door, the huge slab of metal only scraping a couple of centimetres closer to the wall with each endless second. It was this or nothing. "Cover me," I said, grabbing a pickaxe from where it had fallen, then running into the doorway. The guards were still advancing, but their numbers had been thinned out, fewer shadowed forms visible through the smoke and the haze. Praying that my plan wouldn't backfire, I placed the canister on the floor with the valve pointing back into the yard. Wedging it in place with my foot, I lifted the pickaxe and slammed the point down. The metal struck the stone a hair's width from the canister, causing a spark to dance over the valve. My heart almost stopped, but I raised the pickaxe and brought it down again before I could think too hard about what I was doing. This time the blade landed right where I'd aimed, at the joint where the valve met the metal. It split and the canister came alive, blasting out from under my foot with so much force that I almost fell. I kept my balance, watching as the released gas propelled it through the door and into the tunnel. "Fire in the hole!" I yelled. "Shoot the canister!" But my orders weren't necessary. One of the suits must have done the job for me, hitting the missile at point-blank range with his 12-bore. There was a moment of absolute silence and stillness, where the entire prison shone white, every detail embroidered with a golden thread, like some heavenly tapestry. Then a bubble of blue fire ripped from the mouth of the tunnel, bringing with it all the heat and horror of hell. The ground rocked so hard that I couldn't tell which way was up, the shockwave from the explosion sending me and everyone else nearby soaring through the boiling air. Even with my head pummeled by noise, I knew that feeling of being in flight lasted too long. I peeled open one eye, saw that I was lying on the floor 20 metres or so from the vault door. The yard between me and it was like a lake of sapphire flames, vaguely human forms thrashing about in them like they were drowning. What had I just done? I picked myself up, the prison spinning around me as though the explosion had knocked it into orbit. Staggering across the blistering rock, I reached the tunnel, or what was left of it. It looked like it had been turned upside down, massive chunks of rock from the ceiling, along with the machine gun strewn across the floor, and what could only be scraps of blackened soot pasted overhead. There was too much smoke, blocking my view of the control room, but I didn't need to see inside it to know that nothing could have survived the backlash of that explosion, not even a black suit. In the yard, the fireball had enough space to fan out, limiting its power, but in the confined space of the tunnel and the room beyond, it would have been like an atomic bomb going off. The vault door was still intact, although a section of the rock surrounding it had crumbled, leaving it hanging limply from the wall. I suddenly realised I could hear a voice past the ringing in my ears, and I turned to see Bodhi by my side, his face the same, but different. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but I could lip read well enough to know it wasn't pretty. Behind him I could see various kids getting to their feet, all rubbing their dirty faces and jamming fingers into their ears. Apart from the gang members who'd fallen during the firefight, everyone else seemed to be moving, even if it was just squirming on the ground. To my relief, I saw Z among them, staggering in tight circles as he tried to recover his balance. "Crazy! Going for your head! Buried us all!" I could make out snippets of what Bodhi was saying. He saw my confusion and walked right up to me, his voice cutting through the chime in my ears. "I said that was crazy. You could have got us all killed." "A few more seconds and the suits would have been through the door," I replied in a voice so distant it sounded like somebody else's. "You saw how many there were, and that was just the first group. If they'd gotten the elevator working again, then there would have been dozens of the bastards up here, dogs too. You think we had enough ammo to hold them off?" "Yeah," Bodhi said, staring down the tunnel. "I mean, no, but that was a little drastic, don't you think?" "And some warning would have been nice," added Z. "You singed off my eyebrows." He looked up at me and tried his best to smile. "Looks like I'm not the only one." I raised my hand to my forehead, felt the smooth skin above my eyes, painful to the touch. A quick look at Bodhi and I realised that's why he hadn't looked like himself. "You both look like eggs," I said. "I could paint—" "You think this is the right time for beauty tips?" snapped Bodhi. "We're alive, aren't we?" I replied, checking my leg to see a couple of tiny holes in my skin from the lead shot. They must have been ricochets. I've been lucky. "Come on, let's get this mess sorted. Find out if everyone's okay." I ignored Bodhi's muttered comments and turned to the first boy I could see, struggling to extract himself from a pile of dust and debris. Aside from a little bruising and a lot of shock and the absence of his eyebrows, he seemed to be okay. I told him to head to the canteen, saying someone would be in there soon to give him a proper examination. The next kid was the same, traumatised but in one piece, and gradually there was a ragged line of skulls and 59ers weaving unsteadily towards the slop room. Minutes later, everyone had migrated to the cooler air on the other side of the yard, leaving Z and me alone with the remaining skulls and 2 broken bodies by the door. Bodhi had covered their faces with scraps of overalls and was kneeling beside them, speaking under his breath. I stood there awkwardly until he'd finished. "They were good kids," he said, standing up and wiping a tear from his eye. "Good men, I mean. Knowing that I knew them both from the street, soldiers then and always. They would have wanted to die fighting." Z and I shared a look, but Bodhi didn't catch it. He tapped his fist over his chest twice, which was imitated by the small crowd. Then he turned back to the tunnel. "We should check it," he said. "Make sure it's clear." "Need to barricade it too," I added. "There'll be more suits where that lot came from, and the more we take out, the madder they'll get." "No doubt," said Bodhi. "After you." I stumbled over the twisted metal door frame, almost slipping on a pile of loose rock as I walked into the tunnel. The only light was a bulb from the control room, which blinked on and off like it was giving a secret signal. That and the tireless glow from the fire in the yard. Z grabbed my arm, using it to keep his balance as he followed. Together we slipped and stumbled through the flickering darkness, half expecting a black suit to rise from the ashes to take revenge for his brothers. "What happened back there?" I asked, hoping my voice would keep the shadows at bay. "How did you get the doors open?" "I hot-wired the master controls," Z said, stepping around a mound of what might have been shotgun barrels or splintered bones. The doors were on a fail-safe circuit, and once I'd rerouted the wires, I managed to trick the main door into thinking the inner door was closed. Trouble was, something moved up ahead, not seen but heard, and we stopped. The bulb winked on, the weak light struggling, and we saw more debris fall from the ceiling. "Trouble was," Z continued as we started up again, "I had to switch some of the electrical connections around as well. And the second I'd split the power to the door circuit, I realised I'd diverted it back to the lower elevator as well." He laughed, although I could tell it was strained. "Man, you should have seen my face when I heard it coming up. Those doors swing so damn slow that by the time I'd gotten them both open, the suits were almost on me. And you know the rest of the story." We stepped out of the tunnel into the control room. The door at this end had fared less well, pulled completely from the wall and resting against the elevator. I could see that the cabin hadn't quite made it to the top, the layers of debris we'd thrown stopping its progress when its roof had reached knee height. But there had been enough space for the suits to crawl out. "Jeez Louise," whistled Z, "this place is messed up." He was right. The control room was completely black, as if quarried from coal. The bank of electronic equipment was nothing but a puddle of melted plastic and metal, only a handful of wires still visible. I turned to Z, saw him chewing his lower lip, knew he was chewing on his thoughts as well. "What?" I asked. He turned to see Bodhi and the other skulls enter the room, then leaned in towards me. "You want the good news or the bad?" he whispered, not waiting for an answer. "Good is that the warden can't control much of anything without a control room. Bad is that neither can we." I looked at him, shaking my head to show I didn't really get what he meant. He flashed another look at the skulls before directing more soft words into my ear. "I'm saying that this was the only place we could have accessed the controls for the main elevator. And without them..." I felt my heart sink, turning to Z as we finished his statement together. "We're trapped." Uh-oh. Okay, I'll leave it there. But not long ago, I reckon we'll definitely finish it before the end of the week. So tomorrow we'll probably get through another 3. my chapters always shrink a little bit by the time they get towards the end because they move so fast. So I reckon we'll get there tomorrow. Wednesday's tomorrow. Thursday. Maybe Thursday we'll get through 2 or 3. And Friday. Oh, is that it? Oh my god! So we might actually finish it by Friday. Also, so the next chapter is called "The Calm Before the Storm." One of my favourite moments is coming. On my T-shirt might give you a clue about what is coming for those of you that have read it. Which, well, I can't do this in mirror. One of my favourite creations from Inside Furnace. But it's all getting very exciting. I hope you'll join me tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed that. I love them. I love prison stories. I know, obviously, because I wrote them. But those moments when things start to tilt in favour of the people who are trying to escape. I love it. So tomorrow we will carry on. And yeah, I hope you have a really lovely day, whatever you get up to. I hope you stay safe and stay strong. And yeah, tomorrow, let's get the hell out of here. I'll see you then. Bye.